Welcome to Tolkien Tales. Today, we delve into a story that is not just a cornerstone of Middle-earth's history, but one deeply personal to J.R.R. Tolkien himself. This is the tale of Beren and Luthien, a story of a mortal man and an immortal elf maiden, whose love defied king's death and even the darkest of evils. It's a legend of courage, sacrifice, and a love so powerful it echoed through the ages. Our story begins in the First Age of the Sun, a time of open war against the first Dark Lord, Morgoth. Beren was a man of the House of Bor, a noble lineage of men. After the devastating Battle of Sudden Flame, where Morgoth's forces overran the north, Beren's father Barahir and his companions were hunted down and slain. Beren alone survived, living as a solitary outlaw in the perilous lands of Dorthonion. For 4 years he wandered, a ghost in his own land, his hand against all the creatures of Morgoth. So great were his deeds that Morgoth himself set a price on his head. Eventually, hunted and weary, Beren passed through the horrors of Nan Dungatheb, the Valley of Dreadful Death, a place even the bravest feared. He was guided by a fate greater than he knew, and he passed through the Girdle of Melian, a magical barrier of enchantment, protecting the elven kingdom of Doriath. No mortal had ever done this before. He was gaunt, grey, and worn by his long suffering, yet he had finally found a place of peace. And it was there, in the woods of Neldorith, that he saw her, Luthien Tinvil, the daughter of King Thingol of Doriath and Melian the Mayor. She was the most beautiful of all the children of Elvitar, dancing in a moonlit glade. As she danced, a song of starlight and spring seemed to flow from her. Beren was utterly captivated. For a time, he could only watch from the shadows. Enchanted, he gave her the name Tinvil, which means nightingale in the elven tongue. One day, he found the courage to call out to her. Tinvil, Luthien, startled, stopped her dance. In that moment, a doom fell upon her. She looked upon this mortal man, and against all reason, she fell in love with him. They met secretly in the woods, their love blossoming in stolen moments of joy. But their happiness was not to last. Duron, the king's minstrel, was also in love with Luthien, and in his jealousy, he betrayed their secret meetings to her father, King Thingol. Thingol was proud and wrathful. He was the king of Doriath, a mighty lord of the elves, and he would not suffer his immortal daughter, a princess of royal blood, to wed a mere mortal man. He summoned Beren to his throne in the cavern halls of Mengroth. He looked upon Beren with contempt, seeing only a ragged outlaw unworthy of his daughter. Luthien, however, stood beside Beren, declaring her love. This softened Thingol's heart just enough to stop him from killing Beren on the spot, but his pride still ruled him. Thinking to set an impossible task, one that would surely lead to Beren's death, Thingol declared his price. He said, "Bring to me, in your hand, a Silmaril from Morgoth's iron crown. Then, and only then, may you have my daughter's hand." The Silmarils were 3 legendary jewels, crafted by the Elfwine in the Elder Days. They contained the pure light of the 2 trees of Valinor, which Morgoth had destroyed. Now, the jewels were set in the iron crown of the Dark Lord himself, guarded in the deepest pits of his fortress Ang. The quest was nothing short of a death sentence. Yet Beren, fueled by his love and a defiant pride of his own, accepted the challenge. He laughed and said, "For little price do elven kings sell their daughters, for gems and things made by craft. But if this be your will, I will attempt it. And when we meet again, my hand shall hold a Silmaril from the Iron Crown. For you have not looked the last upon Beren, son of Barahir." And so began the legendary quest for the Silmaril. Beren left Doriath alone, traveling north toward the lands of the enemy. His journey first led him to the fortress of Nargothrond, seeking the aid of the elf lord Finrod Felagund. Finrod was bound by an oath to Beren's father, who had saved his life in battle. Honoring this oath, Finrod agreed to help, though he foresaw that the quest would lead to his own end. Finrod, Beren, and 10 companions disguised themselves as orcs and set out, but they were captured by none other than Sauron, Morgoth's chief lieutenant, who commanded the watchtower of Tolkien, the Isle of Werewolves. Sauron, a master of sorcery, saw through their disguises and threw them into a deep pit. One by one, they were devoured by a great werewolf, but none would betray their quest. Finally, only Beren and Finrod remained. When the werewolf came for Beren, Finrod broke his chains and wrestled with the beast, slaying it with his bare hands and teeth, but he himself was mortally wounded. He died in the darkness, fulfilling his oath. Back in Doriath, Luthien had been imprisoned by her father in a great house built in the high branches of a tree, to keep her from following Beren. But Luthien's love was stronger than any prison. Using her own magic, she wove a cloak of enchanted hair that cast a deep sleep on her guards. She escaped her prison and fled Doriath to find Beren. On her journey, she was aided by the great wolfhound from Valinor. One was a noble creature, gifted with speech 3 times in his life. Together, they arrived at Sauron's Isle. Luthien sang a song of power, a challenge to Sauron himself. Sauron, intrigued, sent wolf after wolf to defeat one, but the great hound slew them all. Finally, Sauron took the form of a monstrous werewolf, the greatest the world had ever seen, and came forth to fight one himself. The battle was terrible, but one had Sauron by the throat. To escape, Sauron yielded the mastery of the tower to Luthien. She broke the tower's evil spell, freeing the captives. In the pits, she found Beren, grieving over the body of Finrod. She healed him with her love and light, and together, they buried the noble elf-lord on the hilltop of his own isle. Their quest was not over. Beren, feeling he could not ask Luthien to face the horrors of Angband, tried to continue alone while she slept. But Huan, speaking for the second time, counseled Luthien, and she followed Beren. They came together again, now equals in their desperate quest. They took the pelts of a great wolf and a vampire-like creature that Sauron had sent, and disguised themselves, Beren as a wolf and Luthien as a bat. In this dreadful guise, they flew to the gates of Angband itself. The fortress was guarded by Carcharoth, the Red Moor, a werewolf bred by Morgoth and fed with living flesh. As they approached, Carcharoth barred their way, but Luthien cast off her disguise and raised her hand. She put a spell of sleep on the monstrous wolf, and he fell as if struck by lightning. They passed through the gates and descended into the deepest hall of Angband, where Morgoth sat on his throne, the Silmarils blazing on his iron crown. The Dark Lord was filled with a wicked lust upon seeing Luthien's beauty, and a foul thought entered his mind. But as he schemed, Luthien cast off her cloak and danced before him, weaving a spell of shadow and sleep. Her song was so powerful that all in the hall, including Morgoth himself, fell into a deep slumber. The Silmarils on his crown pulsed with a blinding light. As Morgoth slumped from his throne, the iron crown rolling from his head, Beren took a knife and prized one of the Silmarils from its setting. The sacred jewel burned his hand, but he held it. He was tempted to take all 3, fulfilling the oath of Fuena, but his fate was to take only one. As he reached for a second, his knife snapped, and a shard struck Morgoth's cheek, stirring him from his sleep. They fled in terror. At the gates, Carcharoth the wolf had awoken, and he stood in their path, enraged. Beren held up the Silmaril, hoping its holy light would drive the beast back. But Carcharoth, driven by a terrible hunger, lunged forward and bit off Beren's hand, swallowing both hand and Silmaril. The sacred jewel burned within the wolf's entrails, driving him into a maddened frenzy. He fled, a whirlwind of destruction, breaking through the ranks of Morgoth's armies and running south into the world. Beren lay near death, poisoned by the wolf's fangs. Luthien drew the poison out, and they were rescued by the great eagles of Manwë, who carried them back to the borders of Doriath. There, Beren, now known as Urchamian, the One-Handed, was healed. They returned to King Thingol's hall. Beren stood before the king and said, "I have returned to claim my own. My quest is achieved." When Thingol demanded to see the Silmaril, Beren held up his empty wrist. "Even now," he said, "the Silmaril is in my hand." For a moment, Thingol's heart was softened by Beren's courage and loss. But at that moment, news came of the terror of Carcharoth. The crazed wolf had breached the girdle of Melian and was ravaging the forests of Doriath. The great hunt for the wolf began, led by Beren, King Thingol, and the great hound Huan. They found Carcharoth at a waterfall. The wolf mortally wounded Beren before Huan leaped to fight him. The battle between the 2 greatest wolves was legendary, and in the end they slew each other. Huan, with his last breath, spoke for the 3rd and final time, bidding Beren farewell. They cut open the body of Carcharoth and found the Silmaril, still clasped in Beren's unburnt hand. Beren took the jewel and placed it in Thingol's hand. His quest was fulfilled, but as he did, his spirit departed. The grief of Luthien was so immense that she too faded and died. Her spirit travelled to the halls of Mandos, the place of waiting for the dead. There before Mandos, the judge of the Valar, she sang a song of such sorrow and beauty. a song of the grief of both elves and men that Mandos himself was moved to pity. For the only time in history he could not change the fate of men, but he offered Luthien a choice. She could be released to Valinor, the undying lands, to live in bliss but without Beren, who as a mortal man had passed beyond the circles of the world. Or she could return to Middle-earth with Beren, but she would become mortal herself, sharing his fate and dying a true death, leaving the world forever. Luthien chose mortality. She chose a short life with her love over an eternity without him. They were returned to life and lived together in Tol Galen, the Green Isle, in the land of Osiriand. They had one son, Dior, who was called Iluchiel, the heir of Thingol. And in Dior, the two lineages of elves and men were united for the first time. Beren and Luthien eventually passed away together as mortals, and their final resting place was never known. But their story lived on, a testament to a love that was stronger than death. Their legacy endured through their descendants, including Elrond and Arwen Evenstar, who would one day face a similar choice. The Silmaril they won was eventually set in the sky as a star, a beacon of hope for all the free peoples of Middle-earth. Their tale is a song that never truly ends. Thank you for joining us on this journey through Tolkien's world. If you enjoyed this story, please like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon for more tales from the history of Middle-earth. We'll see you next time.